To talk to us about preparing for sailing at night, which I'm sure will help us enjoy the experience. I mean, look at that's beautiful, isn't it? So we want to enjoy it and we want to be safe. And Dave's going to help us with that. Dave is a career master mariner, ship's captain of over 30 years of experience, so that's fantastic. He spent many long hours, as you can imagine, on the bridge of ships in all sorts of unthinkable sort of weather over many, many years. Many of you would also know Dave is a well-known, experienced local yachting identity and was good enough to give us a previous presentation back in August last year about his experiences on his yacht, The Edge, across the Pacific in the 2018 double-handed yacht race, Melbourne to Osaka. Quite a feat. So Dave has definitely seen it from both sides. He's definitely got a wealth of experience to share with us about sailing at night. And so it's my pleasure to welcome Captain Dave Kenny for his presentation. Beautiful sunset. What's next? Welcome, Dave. And maybe we could have some lights so we can see the presentation. Thank you, Dave.
Should have just left it to Steve, shouldn't I? Thanks for coming. Nice to see you all. That's a bit better. Thanks, Sam. White light's very useful at times. Yeah. So, basically, the plan this evening, I'm going to talk a little bit about broad brushstrokes, day versus night, what happens. Then we're going to move into vision, some science, a bit of biology of the eye and eyesight, how it works. I'll keep that pretty brief. Believe it or not, there's some rules that apply to that and some personal observations that work. One of which we would just have beautifully demonstrated to us, which is when you've got a head torch on, don't look people straight in the face. Smash your eyes out. Fatigue, which is a big part of night sailing, or certainly voyaging anyway. There's a whole bunch of science about fatigue. We won't go into that too deeply, but we'll brush on it. And a few tactics to get us through those tiring points. Probably what's more important, those that like, or Game of Thrones fans might recognise that quote there, but the night is dark and full of terrors, so let's plan our way through it. And then a bit of execution, as we say, how to. So what's the key difference? Well, obviously we don't have our night sight, so hazards are hard to see, and that's lots of things. That's craypots, whales were always my biggest concern when I was travelling by myself. Had a good friend who slammed into a sunfish, which is this half-ton fish that lies horizontally just under the surface, and it smashed the keel out, and he woke his wife with a life jacket and a bucket and said, "Don't panic, darling, but get busy." Yeah. That was right, Joe. Just for information. Unmanned and unlit vessels sounds ridiculous in this day and age, but and my apologies to any fisher folk here. Wouldn't be the first time I've seen a fishing vessel with everybody asleep and it's just drifting. More importantly, it's hard to see fronts and squalls approaching. You certainly can't see the wind. Most of us steer by eyesight off the wind on the water, so that's another problem. When we get to navigation, obviously it's hard to interpret the navigation lights of another vessel. Sometimes a cruise ship's completely lit up, so you know the thing's there, but what is its nav lights telling you? You can't actually see its aspect. Other times, all you've got are the nav lights, and you've got 300 metres of black holes staring at you. That makes it a bit tricky to work out which way they're going. Point on navigation marks, they're designed for ships, so they're designed for a height of eye somewhere from 10 to probably 25 metres. If you're on your average yacht, the Hansi 40, I had a bit of a holiday on this one. What are your height of eye? 2.5 metres maybe, something like that, 3 at the most. perhaps a bit bigger on some of the bigger boats, but not much. So the nav lights don't look right, as in the lighthouses and buoys and beacons. Other things that affect you, what we call the backscatter of your own lights. So those annoying people that turn the white light on down below and you're on deck and you can't see because of that light that's underneath you. And also, as anyone knows, as they're coming into Fremantle at night around the back of Rotto, it's hard to see the navigation marks because of all the shore lights, so the background lights. Those things just all add to the experience, I guess. Sail handling changes a little bit. I think probably for me, one of the biggest ones is the leads of your halyards. So unless you have a really robust system for where your kite halyards go and where your jib halyards go, and my regular crew Giles here will attest that I'm absolutely painfully anal on that halyard goes there, because then you can find it in the dark, you know it's not twisted. It's very hard to look up and see the lead at night, and anything that wraps gets much more difficult to handle. So kite wraps are problems. Coarse trimming, you know, without light, you're coarsely trimming, you're not fine trimming. And whether you use light or not. So light, yeah, obviously light has its points. Sometimes if you're trimming a kite, you've got to flick your white light on, see it light, turn it off again, on and off, on and off. Certainly for foredeck work, so if you're going to plug a kite in, absolutely, I say, put your white light on, we'll just deal with the fact that we lose night sight for that 10 minutes or 2 minutes where you plug a kite in. But yeah, sometimes you need to use it, sometimes you're better off not using it. What else have I said? Awareness. So the environment, as I've already mentioned, you can't see the wind on the water, which is pretty common. Our hazard perception deteriorates, whether that be the weather, the location of things, excuse me, and mental acuity. So we get a bit tired, we don't think so straight, especially if fatigue really starts to hit in, and you tend to become a poor judge of poor decision making, poor judge of those sorts of danger. Most importantly, there's the beauty of sailing at night. So that blanket of stars that you get, the fact that you're on, you know, you've got the boat to yourself, or at the very least you've got the deck to yourself. It's a fantastic thing. Carpe punctum, everyone's heard of carpe diem. Carpe punctum means seize the moment. So maybe you haven't got the whole day, but you've got the moment. Oh, I should have mentioned that was the Whitsundays. I did pass that, didn't I? This is a sunrise, not a sunset, and that's the Burrup Peninsula in the background there, and just the cloud cover over the where they produce all the salts, the Dampier salts. That's taken from a helicopter, but beautiful photograph. So night vision. This may surprise a few people. Night vision can take, to be fully achieved, your night vision can take between 12 and 40 minutes. So 40 minutes to achieve it, and it's lost in a second as soon as someone points a light in your face. Yeah, maybe not completely lost, but it's certainly reduced dramatically. So look after your night vision. It makes a big difference. Rods versus cone. So we start the science lesson, eh? So the way I remember it, cones are in the centre of your eye. They're for bright light, and they see colour. The rods are around the outside of the cones on the retina, and they see colour very poorly, so that's why sometimes at night you don't distinguish a colour of an object, and you can't see it when you're looking straight at it, so you have to actually look at something and then just look slightly away to actually see it. So you get those things popping at you, and you have to go back to check it. It's a bit of a technique, but it does come with practice. That's really one of the things you want to do. You want to practice looking at something and then just slightly looking away. It's only a few degrees, and that'll pop out. So we've basically got a blind spot right in the middle of our vision. It's pretty hard for predator-type people with two eyes looking ahead. Empty field myopia. Now this is, so as Steve said, I'm a marine pilot, and this is one that is really problematic for marine pilots. So what empty field myopia is that if you're looking out of a blank window, staring at the horizon, nothing to engage your eyesight, the brain gets a bit lazy and you just focus at about 2 metres. So you're standing inside the wheelhouse, great big ship, and basically your vision is looking at the window and nothing that's beyond that. And it's a real conscious effort to take you through that. So empty field myopia is the phrase for it, but it's actually quite a problem. Couple that with the fact that you can't see something when you look directly at it, and we've now reduced our perception of hazards. So a couple of things working against us. Let's touch on night lights. Obviously Steve was very organised there. He had his night light, and he was using the red light. So red light was the first one, and obviously all the World War II submarines and most chart rooms, and well, my yacht's got it, even a reasonably modern yacht, has a red light circuit through the whole boat. Red light is fantastic for monochrome charts, for those really old charts, those beautiful old ones from the, I don't know, through the islands, Indonesia, up through there. It's pretty much a black and white chart, or shades of grey, I guess. And red's good for that. The green actually gives you much more colour vision, so the modern charts, like with the yellow and blue in them, you'll see better under a green light. But most importantly, it's the intensity of the light. So even a bright red light can cause you your night sight issues, but sometimes you need it. But probably the best, I did find one head talk once which had a little plastic flap that came down with a red lens, so you could be white light and then flick it down to red light, rather than having to cycle through about 6 different sort of stages of the light to get the one you're after. Right, instruments, don't we love them and hate them at the same time? So I've called it the dual curse of modern navigation. So the night palettes. Has anyone here in this room, there's plenty of experience in this room, has anyone found a night palette that they actually use regularly on their electronic charts? They're crap, basically. Even on the big ships, they're really good gear.
No, we do.
You do? Okay, sorry, I'll stand corrected. There's one person does. Two. All right, there you go. 2. Many people don't. They really do struggle a bit. I find it's black on black and it's reverse. Oh, you do too, do you? Okay,
No.
sorry. Oh, question?
A question.
Right.
Could you just explain your technology of night colour, please?
Oh, sorry. So on the charts, on the electronic charts, you'll have day and night, if nothing else.
Yes.
And so the colour palette of the chart changes. So the normal day one will have sort of like a white background, it's quite bright. You can dim that down, certainly, but the night one will go into a black background, and often it's really quite hard to see the shoals and the reefs and things, well, I find anyway, that there's sort of little white outlines on a black background. The good stuff, like the commercial stuff, will have a twilight setting, and that's the same colours as the day palette, but it just drops the brightness right down, and then you can dim it fully from there. That's probably the best one. If you can find one with a twilight setting, that's probably the go. Yeah, so you need to dim down your electronics as much as possible, but at the same time, and I'm not full of answers, I'm full of highlighting problems, I guess, tonight. You've got to be careful of losing detail. So if you, in your night palette, you can sometimes lose detail. If you dim down too far, too nice and comfortable, and you can look at the screen, you can lose detail in the background. So you sort of got to phase it in and out. You've got to bring the light up, check for stuff, bring it down again. So love them and hate them, the electronics, but they're pretty handy. Also, switch off what you don't need, and have your masking tape out so you can couple those little annoying red lights. Sometimes they're important, so won't talk to mechanical people, but yeah, sometimes you need a red light, but oftentimes you don't. It's amazing how annoying they are, even though they're so dim in the daylight. So I promised you some rules about sight, and photochromatic glasses. So they're the automatic sunglasses. They're the ones that you put on, like Steve wears, clear ones, and then you walk outside and they dim down. They sort of give you that not as good as a sunglass, but about half a sunglass, if you like. So AMSA, our regulator, has come out with a clear statement to all seafarers that photochromatic glasses are not to be worn at sea. It's not allowed. I reckon you lose 20% of your vision when they clear up. So they're okay when they're in the dark mode, but when they lighten out, some of that stays and you lose a whole bunch of sight. So that's actually it's actually illegal to use those at sea during the night time. Okay. Possibly, if you're only going to wake up for one little section of this is the one you want to think about. Okay. So scanning to actually see, not just to look across the horizon and see nothing, but to actually see things. So 3 problems. We read in a certain direction. I read from left to right, that's how I grew up. A lot of people do that. Some cultures read from right to left. We've got a blind spot in the middle of our vision, and so we can't look straight at something, and the brain is lazy. So the brain is very good at filling in the blanks. So if I scan a horizon from left to right, which is my reading way, it knows I'm meant to see, you know, horizon, whatever, and it just fills in the same. So I look quickly, I don't really see, and it just fills it in for me. Your brain does that. It's not you actually being lazy, the brain automatically does it. So the technique to scan a horizon, nothing new to the military people in the room, but you do it in sections. You don't try and scan near and far at the same time. You scan the horizon, and then you scan, at the very least, you'd scan mid-distance. Myself, as a Westerner who reads left to right, I'd scan from right to left, and you do it slowly. So you scan slowly. You have to actually turn your head, not your eyes, because you need to look at something and catch that light out of the side of your vision, just a few degrees off. So you scan slowly, you stop regularly, you do the horizon, then you do the middle distance. When you think you see something, you have to stop, sort of try to focus at that point, and then just look away just so slightly, and that's how you'll pick stuff up. I've got a photo coming up later that shows you a couple of ships that are sort of almost hidden in the background, and there's that's how you find them. Right, did I miss much there? Practice, yeah. So if you practice that, it'll become second nature, and you'll soon be looking and scanning the horizon effectively. Things near and far. So this is an interesting one. Some of the stuff I've researched in more recent days, I've had my own ideas on whether things seem nearer or further away. And to be perfectly honest, I actually think it changes. Sometimes a beacon seems to be a really long way off, and you're never getting there, it's coming up, and then all of a sudden you're on top of it. So are things closer or they're further away? I actually think they're a bit of both. I think sometimes you look at something, certainly the depth perception is reduced. Sometimes you look at something, you think it's miles away, and then all of a sudden it's there. So beware of that one. I guess that's the takeaway message, just be alert to this anomaly and navigate with caution. So, because there's so much youth in the room, I just thought I'd better mention this one. I had a fantastic course I did.
You are the youth, Dave.
Yeah, that's a scary thing, isn't it? Actually, Charles is younger than I, but that's why he takes someone young with him. I did an advanced marine pilot training course, and old Ravi had a fantastic image I couldn't find in my notes that had what your eyesight's like at 60 and 70 and 80, and how it diminishes and how the edges get fuzzy. I wish I could have shown that to you, but anyway, the thing to remember, and it's obviously very individual and hard to qualify, but obviously people's sight deteriorates with age. So it's worth getting a young one to take with you on your crew if you've got options and you've got spare bunks. And I think this explains why you often see a very senior gent.
At night, my love.
Excuse me, you're stealing my thunder. See a very senior gent on a big powerboat with a very much younger woman. Just protect you.
Go, Shaz!
Isn't it funny I picked that?
I'm coming with you.
Young one.
Other things affect your sight as well, of course, or the vision. Fog, mist. Mist really hard to see, or light fog really hard to see at sea. Maybe watch for the stars. If your star blanket starts to disappear, you might get into fog. Dust, we might get some of that if we go to Exmouth. Sea spray, obviously, and snow. So when my son, by the way, skiing in 2019 when we were still allowed to travel in bottomless Japanese powder, which is just awesome. But that can get in your way as well. No, not. It's a great shot. We call that submarining, when you can't actually find the bottom on your skis. Yeah.
Great photo.
Moving on to fatigue now. So that's a pretty ugly shot, isn't it? That's what fatigue looks like. That's probably 72 hours with only 20-minute naps. And you can probably tell just by looking at my face, but my motivation was low, my decision making was poor, I felt exhausted. Strong desire to sleep. I didn't go to sleep, but strong desires to go to sleep. In fact, while we're on that, I actually carry, more recently, when I do a bit of single-handed or even double-handed, I carry the no-dose in the medical kit. I've never yet used it, but it's always there, just in case you have to be awake. You know, if you have to be awake to pass that reef or get through that traffic situation or whatever. I don't necessarily agree with it so much, but, you know, I don't think I'd be at sea without it. Not if I don't have enough people to man the ship properly, or the vessel. So fatigue. Macquarie Dictionary defines fatigue as weariness from bodily or mental exertion. I would probably add to that personally extended periods of wakefulness, which is what you're seeing there. Not so much physical exertion, but lots of wakefulness. We're going to talk a little bit about the science of sleep now. The fact that it's essential, that it happens in cycles. It's a very individual thing. Some people are quite okay on 4.5, 5 hours a night. Others, without 10, they're almost useless. How it affects human performance, and then finally some strategies. Always Yoda. Yeah, just about. Okay, science of sleep. So what we're looking at here, on this side, you're looking at a person who is in a regular, normal routine, sleeping for the amount of time they need each night. They fall asleep, they come down into their deep sleep phases. This is against time on the bottom scale. Deep sleep phases. And then you drift up and back a bit, as we do. And this top one, where you can probably see it says dreaming, sorry I don't have a pointer. That's your REM sleep. And if you note, the portion of REM sleep gets greater as you go through the night. So, how does this work? Okay, so importantly, sleep is essential to human survival. That's it. That's why they use it as torture. After a certain period of time, doesn't matter how noisy it is, how light it is, you sleep regardless. Studies have found this is how we sleep. Lots of studies. I'm not going to quote them, it's not a scientific paper. During the deeper stages of sleep, so when we're down here, that's when we do what I call repairs and maintenance. We fix our bodies, we prevent disease later in life, we do all that sort of stuff. And in the REM stages, this is why REM sleep is so important. In the REM stages, we process the day. So we work out what went well, what didn't. We program the dangers into our psyche, how we're going to behave, and we work from there. Interestingly, the REM sleep, your body's actually paralysed. So isn't that's pretty cool. Anyway, so we get a bit paralysed when we get into REM. Now, if you're getting the right amount of sleep, as I said, we get the deep stuff first and then we get the REM later. What's really interesting is that after even 2 nights of short sleep, so say you're about a 7-hour-a-night person, which is pretty average, if you had 2 hours, just slightly shorter, maybe 2 nights, of say 4.5, 5 hours sleep, which, let's face it, 4.5 hours sleep on a yacht at sea is a pretty good night in the cot, to be honest. Especially if you get it in one go. And what happens is your body flips, and it prioritises the REM sleep over the deep sleep. So what you'll find is the sleep cycle, if we did this, is the long bits of REM would start early in the cycle because they don't know how long you're going to get. So essentially the body sacrifices long-term health for today's lessons. Yeah? The way I like to think of it, there's no point avoiding diabetes if you're going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger tomorrow.
So eat after.
Something such similar.
Drink more wine.
Okay,
So, yes.
3 sheets for the wind. Thought that was pretty appropriate. Couple of things to note here. So they're messing with your head. The scales are different, right? So this is reaction time on the x-axis. Is that right, Giles? X and then Y across the bottom. Anyway, reaction time on the vertical axis. Blood alcohol content here, and hours awake, obviously, on the other one. What jumps out at me is that after 24 hours, so 1 day without sleep, you're probably half cut. You know, you're well beyond what you should be driving a motor car, and you're probably getting there even further. So it just gets worse. What this graph doesn't show, that other studies I've done have shown, is that as your alcohol intake increases, the actual reaction time starts to flatten out. But the sleep deprivation, as time goes on, it just tanks, it just goes straight down. So this probably shows it to a point, but then it gets dramatically worse from there. Fatigue does differ substantially from alcohol impairment, but it gives you a bit of a baseline. Everyone's been 0.08 or whatever, and so you've got some idea of what it feels like. And it's all about reaction time, you know, steadiness on your feet, speech even comes into it. So what else? Fatigue effects. So I've mentioned decision making and judgment, slowing of the reflexes, muscle weakness, so that's a big one. Headaches, dizziness, low motivation, low energy, irritability. Probably all know that.
Bullshit.
It's also extremely difficult to diagnose in yourself. So whilst you're experiencing levels of fatigue, you can't actually see it in yourself. So you have to watch out for your mates, look out for others, look for the slurred speech, unsteadiness, socially withdrawing is another big one. Constant extreme yawning, which we've probably all experienced at some point in our life, and poor decision making. Right, eh? Sometimes it's like that, eh? Well, that's quite cute. So watches. Lots of options with watches. Everyone's sort of got an idea on it. Everyone's got in this room, I have an opinion on it. There's fixed watches, you can rotate them, you can change the length. Depends on the complement of your crew, experience mix, etc. Some things I would urge you to consider. The roughly 1.5 hour sleep cycle. That's really important. So for me, that would be a 2-hour watch is better than a 3-hour watch. A 2-hour watch, the person has time to get out of their gear, sleep for an hour and a half, get dressed again and get back on deck. A 3-hour watch, you're just going to smash them halfway through that second sleep cycle when they wake up. 4 hours is even better because you get 2 cycles. But obviously, you need to be flexible. Flexibility is the key to watch keeping on small vessels. So as the weather deteriorates, you might end up at the point where you're 20 minutes in the beanbag at the base of the mast with your harness on still, you know, hooked into the cockpit because that's all you can steer for, you know. But you bring the time down. The other thing I'm a big fan of is the little low, which is my term for that mid-afternoon dip, where your body temperature comes down again, everyone feels a bit tired. If you can, sort of share that timing out so that people get a nap at the right time when they will actually get a bit of quality rest. So I tend to run my personal favourite is the standard naval watch, 4-hour watch system in, you know, moderate weather, I guess. If it gets really extreme, as I said, we just bring that down and down and down to whatever we can handle. I like to split the dog watches, more about them later.
Poor dog.
But that actually induces a rotation, so that's an evening watch that you cut in half. So instead of just all fours, you have two twos, and that puts a rotation in it, a forward rotation, which is the way to do it. A couple of things that does, the naval watch system, it means that you eat lunch together at 12 o'clock. It means that you have this evening time where you can actually, you know, spend time getting the boat ready for the night, have dinner together, pack up in the daylight. There's a whole bunch of stuff. And more importantly, people get to have, you know, share the journey. Everyone gets to see the moonrise and the sunset and the sunrise and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, think about it. Right. What are we talking about? Water. So yeah, lots of water. If you're getting fatigued, coffee, use it tactically. There's a nice thing called a NASA nap, which is a strong coffee, and drink that reasonably quickly, and then you lie down for 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, the coffee's kicking in, and you're coming out of your little rest period, and it all works very well. And you don't have that sleep inertia. You don't have the really foggy feeling as you wake up, as you come out of your nap. Snacks will keep your energy up and give you something to do, as will trimming and steering by hand, or actively trimming, or active watches, as they call it. What we talked about a little while already. So naps, yeah, so aim for either 20 minutes or an hour and a half. Try to avoid that middle period, because you'll come up groggy and take a bit of time to get sorted. How many ships? Oh no, sorry, next photo. How many ships can we see? Just the two. I think when I looked really carefully on my big computer, there might be another one just tucked in behind that leading vessel. But you can see how they're about to disappear, aren't they? And there'll just be nav lights. And if there's lights on the shore there, I think that's Wakayama area, Japan, Kishida. Right. Planning the night passage. So navigation, equipment, the people, the routines, and what about the big problems? So whether you've got a passage of one day or 1 year, like Johnny Sanders goes and does, preparation is required. Even one night round the back of Rotto and back again, you need to think about how you're going to do it. The other point is that on board a yacht, weather is king. You know, the boats are very vulnerable with the angle of the breeze, the sea pattern, all that sort of stuff. So the first question to ask is, what's the forecast? Is it going to get worse overnight? Is it going to get better? Stay the same? What are the courses we're going to steer? How much runway do we have? That's sort of the phrase that I guess myself and my crew have developed, with how much sort of straight line distance, give or take 10 degrees, have we got before we get onto the bumpy stuff. So we want to know how much runway we've got, so that we know when we've got to tack, or when you've got to get someone up to drive the kite, or whatever you're going to do. What are the conditions that initiate a change of course? If I bear down 30 degrees because of wind shifts, is that time to tack or not? These things need to be understood and by the people who are on watch. How much traffic is expected? On a night like this, you probably expect to see, in that sort of place, you probably see 100 ships. Most of them going in the same direction, hugging the coast, but there'll be some outliers, and there'll be fishing traffic as well, always a problem. And what are the hazards? So, you know, lighthouses, what are the hazards of lighthouses and landfalls? What's the primary and secondary means of navigation? And who's responsible for that? Is the person on watch, or is it one person navigating and everyone just does what they're told? These are all questions that must be answered. Equipment. Steve demonstrated some of it earlier. A good head torch is critical. Strong spotlight for, you know, other work's important. Maybe some new batteries. Head torches, if they're waterproof, dimmable, and with a night setting, that's probably really what you're after. I've already talked about my one with the clip-down lens. Safety equipment, which comes under the same heading. Harnesses, tethers, life jackets, PLBs, AIS, MOBs, markers. Don't forget the physical MOB marker, but also the electronic ones. Does everyone on board know what button to press and how long you have to hold it, and what that then means? You know, does that change your waypoint to the position where they just went over the side? And if you press it again, does that clear it? Generally it does, so be careful of that one. So if someone on watch has pressed it and the skipper wakes up 10 minutes later and presses it again, you've now updated that position with an incorrect one, or a later position if you like. Sharp knives and rig gear is always important, and even more so at night, I think. My rig gear, and I use that term broadly, consists of a battery-powered grinder and a pair of parrot beak cutters that stand about that high, and they're capable of cutting through the dense diaphragm wire and also maybe 12mm spectra, which anything that was on the rigging, and they're all polished up and sharpened and wrapped in denso tape, so they just sit there ready to go. You hope never to use it, but if you had to, I just wouldn't leave home without it. If you're going to need that stuff, you're going to need it in a hurry. Right, the tricky one, people. So, in my opinion, it pays great dividends if everybody on board clearly understands and has a buy-in to what the plan is, what we're doing. They know the rules, they know requirements, how much authority for decision making they have, that sort of thing. So I tend to put out well before a voyage starts written rules, and they're broken into safety rules and boat rules, just as the way I think of it. And everybody who comes on board commits to complying with those before we set off. That's a given. You either play by the rules or you don't come. They cover such things as defining night as 1 hour before sunset, which feeds into our harness rules and harness and tethers. I talk about respect for the boat, respect for other people. Topical at the moment, I suppose. How many people are on deck for a foresail change? What are the rules around that? Do you leave the cockpit when you're the only one on deck or not? And also the call-out plan, which is really important. So, what do you call people for? Often people are reticent to call someone else up to help them, but there's times that you need to. So, professionally, I always wrote night orders, and my last line in my night orders was always, if in doubt, call me. And so I'd put those in front of the officer of the watch and go, how do you know if you're in doubt? And they'll go, and I'd go, well, you're in doubt. If you can't say, I'm not in doubt, then you're in doubt. So, night orders are probably like the big ship version, if you like, are probably a bit of overkill for yachting. I detail courses, speeds, call points, the intention of the night, especially if you're doing something a bit different. Probably not needed in a small crew, maybe in a bigger one, or if you've got a really challenging navigational passage or some inexperience on deck or something like that, might be worthwhile thinking about. That one's for Sharon. Righto. So routines. Plan early for success is my saying. On watch, make sure you prepare yourself before you go. So that's food, drinks, warmth, spare beanie in your pocket, whatever, head torch, knife. Know the navigation picture. Know the forecast before you go on deck. Off watch, quite seriously, one earplug in the ear that's up is a great way to cut out some of that scraping and grinding that goes on deck. Otherwise, just get really tired and you fall asleep. Set an alarm. A vibration alarm in a pocket will wake you up from the deepest sleep. Ask for people to call you as well, that's important. But also be prepared for urgent responses. I've always have my jacket nearby. I tend to have my wet weather boots pulled down like a firey does over his sea boots, so I can step into them, pull that up, and I'm at least half dressed. If you need it in a hurry, which you might be, then be ready for that. So a little story about watches here. Dog watches. So the dog watches are named, there's a couple of people I know in this room will understand, are named after the period in the evening where you prepare a ship for sea. It's a naval term. And so the first dog is 1600 to 1800 and the last dog's 1800 to 2000. And what that comes from, on a ship there's lots of weather-tight doors and sometimes watertight doors with about 8 clips on, dogs securing latches. And as you start to prepare your ship for night, someone goes around, the person on watch goes around, closes these weather-tight doors and puts one latch closed. So that if the guys are bringing their paint in or still putting stuff away, people are coming and going, it's easy to move, but the intention is we're starting to get ready for the night. And then the last dog watch, the watchman will go around just as they secure for the night and dog down each latch on that door. So there's 8 latches holding that door shut. So that's why it's first and last dog, not first and second dog, because all the dogs are done. It's a little segue into thinking about preparing for night and starting early, really. So you've got to get it all done. You've got to get it done in ample time. Maybe even consider a list, checklist to aid tired minds once you're a few days out. Some simple things like charge your batteries. This might minimise the disturbance overnight. Obviously, you've got to keep an eye on the battery, but always give them a good charge for an hour in the evening, depending on your boat. Discuss and decide your sail configuration. Are you flying kites at night or are you not? Are we likely to have a building breeze? Do we want to whack a reef in now, change the headsail now? When Paul and I went to Osaka, we invariably made a decision on the headsail, because we had hanked on headsails. So we invariably made a decision on the headsail somewhere in the evening, because it's quite an effort to pull one down, you know, flake it, bag it, put the other one up. So we get that out of the way early. It's a lot easier to deal with in daylight. To reef or not to reef? Quick show of hands, who reefs routinely just because it becomes night time? Okay, quite a few. I've seen the arguments both ways. I've heard that, you know, that's one less thing to do, and I get that. I've also heard that a mast is better supported by a full main. So, yeah, I guess I've got a foot in each camp. I tend to reef when I need to. It only takes about, you know, can be done in a couple of minutes. And it depends on the experience of your crew, but yeah, there's certainly a question to ask. And yet we've talked about other sail changes. Check the chafe. You're about to push the ship into, you know, 10, 12 hours of darkness. Any chafe points will come up. So chafe, like, you just got to be looking for it all the time. But it's, you know, at the very minimum, dawn and dusk, because otherwise something will let go. I use the phrase freshen the nip. So you might want to ease your main halyard 3 inches and pull down on your Cunningham, or ease the tack a little bit, haul up on the kite halyard. Just get the heat out of that little section. Just move it around a little bit. Probably should do it more often than twice a day, but yeah, as a very minimum. Freshen the nip up. Batten the hatches. Eat dinner. It's always a good idea during this dog watch period. Get it done. We've always worked the routine that the person who's doing the last dog would cook the meal, you'd eat together about 1800, and then the person going off watch cleans up, packs up and goes to bed. And it's so much easier if there's still a bit of daylight. Emergencies. Probably many skippers' nightmare is the man overboard scenario, especially at night. It's so much more dangerous. But there's also wrapping a kite around the forestay or the mast or the spreaders or something, rig or hull failures, groundings or fire, just to name a few of the horrible things that might occur. Now most emergencies will be somewhat more difficult to deal with at night, but particularly a person overboard. Fortunately, that one is actually the preventable one. If you've got the right systems in place and the crew discipline to apply them, you know, as in you don't step out of the cockpit until you, sorry, out of the companionway until you're actually already hooked in to your tether system. Also, then that will go a long way towards it. Although I'd have to lie if I said I hadn't actually hooked onto a jib chute while I was going forward once, or even twice, and been picked up by my opposite number going, "Oh, Dave, you actually just clipped onto a jib chute, not the jack line." So it can happen. Good routines will help. Checking the bilges at the change of watch, making sure you switch the gas off, counting for personnel. You can even count them while they're asleep if you've got a big crew. And even taking the risk seriously, all aid in keeping the vessel safe and the crew. What do we got? We're almost there. That's a shot from my day job. So we're warming through the steam engine on this ship. It's a Moss Rosenberg style LNG tanker. And that's Dampier Harbour about to go out, and arms are off, so cargo work's complete, gangway's off down here, and so no more people coming and going, just warm the engine through and we'll be letting go in about an hour's time, so be full by the time we let go. Righto, executing the night passage. What was it there? Start early, yeah, so start the watch routine as soon as possible, really. It's easily said and hard to achieve, you know, on a yachting type voyage when you've got the excitement of people going to sea and the all got their energy, the reserves and a fresh crew. A couple of days in, they won't be worried about that, they'll be going straight to bed. But certainly by the time it reaches early afternoon, you have to have your watch system in place, because you want the people who have got that, who are off watch, to go and get a little bit of a nap anyway to prepare for the night. Don't miss that little load, would be my advice. On a ship, like this ship here, as soon as the moorings are back on board, so if let go, the moorings are on and everyone's stood down from mooring stations, they'll be straight into their watches. They'll be well and truly established before the pilot gets off, because that's what they do. It works well. Get back into it. Like I said, care on watch. So preparing well, ensuring you're hooked on. We've already talked about that. Preserving your night sight as best you can. If in doubt, call out. Usually the practice is to call the next watch, not the one that's just gone off. And if you think of really bad weather, some poor bugger's just gone off watch and finally got dry and finally got their head down, if you have the luxury of a 3-watch system, then at least give them that first half, if you like, to rest before you call them. So that usually the way I think of it is you call those who are due on rather than those who have just gone off. So, nurture sleep in the off watch. Who's been annoyed by the tethers scraping along the cockpit deck before? We wrapped ours in a bit of wetsuit. We got a wetsuit, cut it up, wrapped it in neoprene, and then you end up walking around like you're in prison, like with one of those balls and you're off like this and you're sort of walking along. Upset something. So think of the people who are off watch. You know, the clips, you might be able to take them, you might be able to lift them at some point. Even sliding your backside back and forth on the deck and on the seat can be noisy. If you've got a chance, stop that. Avoid light and noise below decks. Give people as much chance as possible. Shut the alarms off. If you don't know how to turn off the AOS alarm, perhaps don't use it. I'd caution against that. I'd say actually learn how to use it and switch it off and jump up and down and turn it off. Sail handling noise. Sometimes you can avoid it, sometimes you can't. If attack can wait to the end of watch, well then maybe that's worth doing. Sometimes you just have to do it, so it's just as it is. I said, do unto others? Yeah, do unto others. Don't be late for watch, ever. In my opinion, the requirement is to be dressed, prepped, have your eyes adjusted, have seen the navigation picture, so know what you're doing for the next 4 hours or however long you're on. Know your hazards, know your runway, you've got the weather forecast, and you're all on deck, ready to go before the allocated time. So, and that takes a good 15 minutes. So, yeah, it's amazing how long 1 or 2 minutes feels like at midnight when you're desperate to go down. And it just makes for good shipmates, to be honest. We've already talked about fresh in the knit, but chafe, chafe, chafe. Check everything all the time. So, moonlit night. It's a beautiful photo. You don't tend to, well I never did anyway, took many photos, don't take many photos at the best of times, but certainly not at night. Beautiful, glorious moonlit night, and I was coming home from Dampier, so the serenity, eh? Enjoy the serenity. The best time of the day is the night. I haven't even checked my watch, but probably gone, how are we going? It's probably gone quite long. So we've spoken about the differences between day and night sailing, talked a little bit about eye biology, some practical ways to combat the deficiencies. Yoda told us to keep sleeping, which sort of helps. Watch routines, very, very important. Spend some time with it, get your crew buying into it. The little alien kid showed us how to prepare on and off watch for night sailing, and the importance, in my opinion, of the dog watch and that process leading into dusk period. And finally, execute the passage. Challenge yourself to become chafe hunters and do unto others by not being late for watch. A very wise man advised me that if you want to go out for, I'm sure there's lots of people here who have done a lot of night sailing, but if you do want to go and try it for the first time, or in a slightly supported environment if it's been a while. South Perth are doing their night race on the 10th of April, starting 16:30 at Hall Bank. So get amongst it. And I'll throw it open to questions if there's any. Sure.
Dave, just a couple of questions about visibility from the bridge of a ship.
Yep.
How important is AIS on a yacht? Tricolour versus normal deck level nav lights,
Yep.
and radar reflectors.
Okay. Yachts are invisible from a ship. Hear me now, right? Seriously, radar, without a radar reflector, you are invisible on radar. Completely invisible on radar. Forget the mast, forget the steel engine, you can't see them. Maybe on a night like that, moonlit night, yeah, you could if you tuned your radar down enough. But any sort of weather, you have to get rid of the sea clutter and things. Don't forget, ships are looking for other ships, occasionally for fishing boats, and they're all made of steel. So they're not really looking for fiberglass. Tricolour light, much more visible from a ship because it's high, and often, well, they now come as LEDs, so they're much more reliable as well. I think the side nav lights for the river or for yacht on yacht just out here probably see each other better, but certainly from a ship's perspective, the tricolour at the top would be the go. So yeah, radar reflector, tricolour, AIS, for the cost of an AIS, would be insane not to have one. Seriously, and it's a huge advantage to you as well, because you can glance down and see a container ship that's doing 25 knots coming at you. You can't even see the dash thing yet, and yet you know he's passing 5 miles clear because it gives you a CPA. You don't bet the farm on those because things can change, but it certainly gives you a good idea. Yeah, absolutely buy one of those. Hello, at the back.
Question with regards to AIS-A, AIS-B. Do the ships see the Bs?
Yes, they do. Yeah, for sure. So the difference, and I might be corrected on this, but my understanding, the A and B is really about how much you can interrogate the detail. But certainly, if you've got a transmitting AIS, the ship will see you, and you will be able to see them. You probably can't go in and find other stuff out about them, and you can't. Certainly, in my AIS-B, you can't change if you're underway or at anchor, or if you're a tanker or a bulk carrier or a warship. But that's all stuff we don't need.
Just on that point, AIS-B is only about, I think, 1 watt, and AIS-A is 25 watts. So
Okay.
I see AIS-A a long way,
Yep.
where maybe 5-10 miles would be.
Well, that's good. We can see the ships because they all have the AIS system as well. And I guess there's more power draw too. There's probably a couple of things that come off that, but yeah. Well, there you go. I don't know the difference in price. Do you, by any chance? Have a rough idea?
Oh, it's about $1,000 for an AIS-B with transmitter.
Yep.
A is sky's the limit because it's got everything.
Hello.
Is it true that commercial ships are transmitting less AIS data than they used to?
As best I know it, the AIS is a very busy little place, that VHF channels that they have. So ships tend to broadcast what they need to. The system automatically, as soon as you go to anchor, for example, on a ship, and you change your AIS to being at anchor, you'll transmit your position once every 3 minutes because they're not expecting it to change. I believe it changes with, I'm not 100% sure, I think it changes with speed. Certainly if you're underway, it's every 6 seconds or 12 seconds, whatever it is. But yeah, I don't know if they've actually reduced the amount, but it's certainly news to me.
Well, I passed a comment to a marine electronics man. I said,
Yeah.
when I left in 2008, I could get all the ship's data, where they were from, where they were going to, what sort of cargo they had, their speed, blah, blah, blah. And I said, is there anything wrong with my AIS because I don't see that data anymore. I only see
right.
the bare bones data. And he said it's due to piracy.
Yeah, so definitely there is data you can put into an AIS, so you can put in your last port, your next port, and blah, blah, blah. And you probably find that people aren't doing that as much, because that gives an indication to when you're turning corners and what you might be doing.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's interesting. I would have thought you put less data in the piracy area, but not if you're on the Australian coast.
Thank you.
Right, Phil?
You give me some science as to why my eyesight becomes so shit. Which is good. The other thing I'd just like to say that with fatigue, just keeping your crew warm is really, for me, really important to try and reduce fatigue.
Well, it's very well established that hypothermia exhausts very, very quickly.
Even in the tropics.
Yeah, as soon as you're cold, as in proper cold, that saps you. You'll get every virus going past and all that sort of thing. Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying dog watch, because I always thought in the old days it was putting Bolly and Alfie to bed, and now I always think it's putting Diva to bed. So you clarified it for me, thank you.
A bit of a difference. Yeah. All good? Steve?
So just for those lights, you know, you talk about the visibility of the masthead light,
yes,
and as opposed to the navigation lights down at the deck level.
Yep.
And then one argument might say, well, you might as well put them all on and you'd be more visible, sort of thing. But I think the law is against that.
Yes, contrary with the coal regs.
So you shouldn't have both sets on, is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. I mean, so maybe think where you are. If you've got the option to have both, if you're in close doing a race around the Cairns or a twilight or something, it's probably good to have the deck lights on, the ones at deck level. But if you're offshore, you know, and you've got waves coming over, waves will hide the nav lights, of course, if they're low, and whereas the tricolour will be much more obvious. That's all right. Betty's just hurrying me on there. It's time for another drink.
It's always Betty.
I was just going to comment the AIS. In our experience, we've been at sea. The ships have actually radioed us, hailed us, and said we're passing green to green and we're passing red to red.
That's good. Quite common. Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So they're awake. You know that.
Yeah.
Hello, Jen.
Hi, Doug. Thanks. Just back on AIS again, I'm certainly a firm believer in it.
Yeah.
But the aspect of where I really used it was around Port Hedland and Port Lambert, when I talked to two ships to make sure they saw us and to make sure we agreed on what we were going to do.
Yep.
And it was fantastic. They had their names on, so I could see the name and call them up by name.
Yeah, exactly. So no misunderstanding.
And that's what they're supposed to do, I guess. But I just sailed up from Albany, and at least half the ships that we saw had no names.
Oh, really?
And no information. We probably saw on AIS, because I didn't see anything physical, I saw one physical. There were probably about 15 ships altogether on 3 days, and probably close to half of them had no names. And I don't know what's going on with that.
It takes a while for the cycle to go for the additional information to update. It can take anything up to 10, 15 minutes.
They had all the other information.
And it's
They had all the speed
Yeah, you're right.
and
The way it works is that AIS sends sentences. So the ships have to send every so often their MMSI and their Latin long and their speed and direction. But it might only be every 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. It actually sends a ship's name with the MMSI, and then your AIS receiver will update that information. So if you sit and wait, eventually all the names will come up.
Yeah, I agree.
But it might not be for half
I agree.
an hour.
Yeah.
So I thought it was distance, because when we've been racing out here, when the one yacht gets further away from us, we don't get their names, we only get their MMSI on it. And as we get closer to them, because we're going to catch them,
Yay, tweet.
we get their names appear on the screen.
It's not the proximity, it's the time.
It's the time.
Okay. So that's
It's
good.
late.
Yeah.
I just want to ask what your suggestion is if you've only got 5 crew.
Yep.
And what sort of watch system you should
how much experience have they all got? How well do they know your boat?
Well, the boat's pretty new, so we've only bought it in September.
Okay. So it really is a matter of experience. So with 5 people, there'd be a couple of ways you could run it. You could take someone out of the watch cycle altogether as in sometimes the skipper stays out of it. My last Sydney to Hobart, the skipper stayed out of the watch, and he was the circuit breaker, if you like, and did all the radio comms and did most of the navigation. And you just work, 2 or 4 about, whatever you sort of decide. You might find that if the weather's really good, only one person needs to be on watch. So therefore you can, pretty much all go to bed and do a 2 or 3 or 4 hour watch, whatever sort of works for you. The time on watch obviously gets harder as the conditions deteriorate. But it's the reason I'm pushing that 4 hour watch is because of the time off if you're on short crew, so that you get the amount of sleep. So if you're getting 2 lots off, you could easily do a 3 hour watch because you're getting 6 hours off, if that makes sense. So you're just going to have a look at that, know who's getting up next, so they know who to call. Perhaps some people aren't as confident. How much hand steering are you doing? How you're configuring the boat at night. Yeah, it's a whole bunch of stuff. And there's as many ways to run a watch routine as there is people, probably, I suggest.
Just if you change then to just 2-person, a husband and wife,
yep.
in regards to not just the watches, but everything that you said.
Well, a lot of the sailing I've done has been double-handed.
Yeah.
So I would suggest that not a lot would change, but definitely you've got to look out for each other. And it's even more important to preserve that time off watch and look after the person who gets a chance to get their head down. And there's times, sometimes you just can't wake them up. And you just get to do a double because you can.
That wasn't me.
No, it wasn't me.
Remember that.
But that's it.
Dave, you haven't talked a lot about radar, and a couple of years ago I had an incident coming into Fremantle where there was a fair bit of traffic around, and it was early hours of the morning and the lights were confusing, and I could see a big ship on radar, but not on AIS, and I assumed that it was a military vessel that had its AIS turned off, I just interested to know your view on having radar as well.
Well, yeah, radar's fantastic if you know how to use it. So many years ago, I did a delivery from Fremantle to Melbourne. They might have been doing the America's Cup out the front here about that time, and this fellow knew how to set his radar up because he had a piece of paper where a bloke had set it up once, and he knew each dial had to be in that sort of spot. So he had a little map that worked for all occasions. Well, that's not quite how radar works, but anyway. Learn how to use it, yeah, for sure. It's good information, but I don't have one on my boat. Fortunately, AIS is sort of helping to overtake that, but AIS does rely on the other person, as you say, transmitting something. Radar's fantastic in rain, and it's fantastic for landfall and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, if you've got one, especially if you've got a 3 centimetre radar, that's great. But learn how to use it and learn how to plot. You probably wouldn't have ARPA on them, so you're probably doing manual plots, but it's not real hard to work out how to do that. Any more? Okay, once. All right. Thank you very much.
On behalf of everybody, I think you've shared a lot of your experience with us for our benefit. A lot of knowledge and a lot of things to think about there before we get out next time at night time. So, and thanks very much. I know you're going to Exmouth as well, as many people here are. And so all the best for your Exmouth trip as well.
Thank you.
And we'll see you up there, but great benefit to us. So thank you, David.
Thank you.
If I can just quickly mention a couple